to introduce Teresa Payne.
Thank you, Wado. I'm afraid I'm one of those speakers that likes to move when I talk, but unfortunately, as you can tell, my speaking voice doesn't project quite as well, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to depend on the speaker. So my apologies to begin with. I am very blessed and very honored to be here to speak with you about something that is very dear and near to my heart. So give me a moment and let's make sure I can do the IT here first. Oh, she isn't going to have to give up the day job after all. So, Osio, Donada Kauai, Uli Helishti, Tewisa, Salagi, Anawi, Talakwa. My name is Teresa. I am Cherokee Indian. My family does come from Tahlequah. We, like many others of us, moved out of Oklahoma during the Great Depression. Unlike many Cherokees, we didn't come right to California. We actually went to Wyoming because my grandfather was able to get a job as a cook on a sheep ranch. The man never cooked in his life. But but he got a great cookbook, and incidentally, I still have it, and the recipes are awesome. But eventually, the aerospace industry opened up, and we ended up in Southern California. Like many Cherokees, we are outside the boundaries of our native land. And with that, we don't have necessarily those cultural connections and language. And to preserve that, which I'll talk about a little later, we talk about our satellite communities and the importance of our family and the stories of our grandmothers and grandfathers. But today, as part of this conference, I would like to talk about emotional wellness and what that means to us as Native people. A little bit of an outline so you kind of will know where we're kind of going. We're going to look at wellness, what we mean by wellness, and what our historical background with that, and what the impact of the European contact has done to our peoples collectively, what the activist movements that began actually long before the 60s and 70s, but really brought us spearhead, and where our future is. So what is emotional wellness? Well, I looked it up, and there's the definition for you all to look at. And really, what is this? This is a complex interplay between mind, body, spirit, and our context or emotions. For wellness to occur, each area functions in harmony or balance. Balance occurs naturally to some degree in all areas. So why is this important? And what does it mean to us as Native people? It's important because the energy of the whole is greater than the sum of each part. When a person is in harmony, they thrive, they're resilient, they contribute synergistically to those around them. For Native people, it's very similar in each of our cultures. Practice here, if I can. So, we look at spiritual, physical, emotional, mental. So what does that mean to us? For emotional, we look at our family, our elders, our culture, our traditions. For our physical, nutrition, sleep, exercise, recreation, having fun. Spiritual, it is our ceremonies, it is our rituals, it is our dreams and our prayers. And for mental, we have storytelling, reminiscing, remembering, memorials. These definitions change with each people. Unfortunately, the federal government has tried to lump all Native peoples under one roof, one belief, one spirit. We are, a lot of this is resonant with us, but each of us are unique in our own cultures. So although the colors on the wheel may be different depending on our culture, or a wheel may not be, tradition within our culture. It is something that we can relate to, this concept of the whole. When we look at this, this is not new. This is the medicine wheel that's in Bighorn, Wyoming. It's about a little above the 9,000 foot level on the Medicine Mountain. It dates to about 7,000 years old. It is part of 60 to 150 wheels that you will find throughout Wyoming, North Dakota, Colorado, and Canada. So this is not a new concept to our peoples. What is important to us and for us to remember when we look at emotional wellness is our histories, our heritage, our strengths, and our foundation. That is where we resolve, that is where we draw our resilience. We each have similar but unique cultures. We each are supportive within our own cultures and our societies of our members. Traditionally, we have structures and roles within that society. We know who we are, where we came from, what our expectations are. It is a solid foundation. We have balance and community, whether it be a definition by the Hopi or by the clans of the Cherokee. That gives us our structure, our context, where we are. Traditionally, historically, if we look back, we kept balance. Our homes, our societies, our towns, our villages, our clans, our bands, all adapted to our environment. We made ourselves fit, and it fit us. And this is where we thrive. This is where we taught, we learned, we supported, and each member within our society was balanced. In Cherokee society, there was no poverty, there were no starvation, there was no lack of knowing who you are and how you fit and what your gifts contributed to the synergy of the whole. And it was the same through the other. We supported ourselves with food. Yes, we know the Three Sisters, part of the base of our tradition. For Cherokees, the land was truly worked by men and women, but the gardening, the food, the growth of the food, the land, the home, those were all female. We are a matrilineal culture. In other words, I am Cherokee because my mother was Cherokee, as was my grandmother and my great-grandmother and great-great. Although the father contributes, the heritage is matrilineal, where some peoples it's patrilineal. Same with government, matriarchal or patriarchal or balanced. And in Cherokee, as in with most Native peoples, it was balanced. Men and women both had equal say in the governance of their society. Our protein sources, we did not keep domestic animals. Ours were buffalo for the folks that lived on the grasslands. For our people that are traditionally woodland, our main protein sources were deer and birds, fowl, turkey. We used fishing if we had available within our peoples. So we had that balance, that part of the physical need for ours. And then we had our culture. Yes, there's a story we just recently heard from one of our gentlemen on stickball. For Cherokee men, traditionally, there were two seasons. There was the season of war and the season to play stickball. And that was it. That's what the men liked to do. And they hunted in between once in a while. But yes, we had our traditions with our warriors. We had our ceremonies and our dances that made sense. We had our storytelling that gave us the history and the cultural sense of where we were. In other words, we maintained balance with all of these. But when we look at the European contact, for each of us, it was different. It was different where we lived in this country. It was different in the value they saw in our land. It was different, but similar. Same resonance across the story. We were stricken with diseases our people had never learned to fight. Many people likened it to the Black Death Native peoples felt. Our social structures, our culture, our civilization was systematically destroyed piece by piece by piece. We had disruption, outright genocide, corruption across the story. It kept going and going. It is very similar on this particular map, and I'm not sure if this will read through. But this is the languages of the people. And as you can see, as the red advances across, it almost goes hand in hand with the changing on the frontiers. And yes, it was occurring in California peoples too. We had the Spaniards here that were moving in. So that by the time we get today, when we look at our native languages, we see they're at risk. But when we began in the early 1800s, the westward migration, that overwhelming westward push, we see languages are being stripped away, but cultures, people, civilizations are being disrupted, and it moves across the country. Each of us had our own trail. Each of us have our own stories to tell. We each talk about that, and we need to always remember this. Like the quote I put up here of Chief Sitting Bull, the Lakota Sioux. Irrespective the size, we would still be dispossessed because what we had was of value. But as this happened, we saw things change within our sense of balance, our sense of community. We lost our spiritual, it was fractured. We lost physical, we were starving. We had lost our ability to be self-reliant individuals. We lost our mental, we were not valued, and emotional. So it was fractured. So that by the time of the end of the 19th century, where this is actually in Oklahoma, this sculpture, this plaster sculpture by James Earl Fraser, showing the end of trails. It was really how Western society really saw Native peoples. They saw us as this dejected, hopeless individual. And I quote hopeless because I have another story to tell about this. But at the dawn of the 20th century, and this gentleman, Frederick Jackson Turner, reflected the views of his scholarly few. I found this rather offensive, and I don't mean to be, but I did. That we are on a road to oblivion. The frontier has been settled. The American people, the Native Americans will dwindle into non-existence. And then we entered into the 20th century. Many scholars term this as the area of blind neglect. We've lost, though many of us were on reservations, those of us who had land that was given to us by the Dawes Roll, it was being stripped from us. We were losing what little piece of identity as far as the land goes, as far as self-reliance, self-sufficient. We saw a lot of this in this. This family was lucky. They had a visiting nurse come from the Indian Health Services. That was a very rare